The ginger root slipped from her hands and hit the stainless steel counter with a wet thud. Madison froze. Not because she'd dropped it, but because the man standing in the doorway of her tiny Itaewon shop was crying without making a sound. Just standing there in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent, shoulders perfectly still, tears tracking down his face like they'd been doing it for months and had learned to fall quietly. She didn't ask if he was okay. Something about the way he looked at the bundles of dried herbs hanging from her ceiling, like they were ghosts he recognized, made the question feel small. "We're not actually open yet," she said instead, wiping her hands on her apron. "The sign. I can smell it from outside." His voice was rough, Korean-accented English. "What is that?" Madison glanced at the pot simmering on the hot plate behind her. Her grandmother's recipe, the one she'd been making every morning since she'd arrived in Seoul 8 months ago. Scent memory. Homesickness medicine. A way to keep Accra alive in a country that still stared at her brown skin on the subway. "Just tea," she said. "No." He stepped inside uninvited and she should have been afraid. Strange man, expensive clothes, that hollow look in his eyes, but instead she just waited. "That's not just tea." He was right. "Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our Afro-Korean stories travel. And if you enjoy these tales, like and subscribe to keep them alive. Now, let's continue." His name was Min Jun-seo. He told her this after she'd poured him a cup, against her better judgment, against the voice in her head that sounded like her mother saying, "Baby girl, you don't know these people," and watched him take the first sip. The way his eyes closed. The way his breathing changed. "How much?" he asked, setting the cup down with the careful precision of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something. "It's not for sale. I just make it for." "How much for the recipe?" Madison laughed. "Couldn't help it. You can't buy my grandmother's. Name your price." He pulled out his phone and she saw it then, the slight tremor in his hands. The way his wrist looked too thin for his watch. "Please." That last word cracked something open. She sat down across from him at the small table she used for consultations, though consultations was a generous word for the way she'd been scraping by, selling shea butter to homesick exchange students and teaching herself Korean from YouTube videos at 2 a.m. "Why do you need it?" Jis looked at her for a long moment. Outside, Seoul moved like it always did. Fast, bright, indifferent. Inside her shop that smelled like ginger and grief and something her grandmother used to call hope in a pot, time felt different. "I'm dying," he said simply. "And your tea is the first thing that hasn't hurt in 6 months. She should have asked what he meant. She should have told him to see a real doctor, that she wasn't a healer, just a girl who'd fled a broken engagement and a family that loved her too much to let her breathe, who'd chosen Seoul because it was far enough away to feel like freedom. Instead, Madison heard herself say, "Sit down. Let me make you a fresh batch." She didn't know then, couldn't have known, that Min Jun-seo wasn't just rich. That the tremor in his hands came from chemotherapy that had failed. That Seoul's top oncologists had given him 4 months, maybe 6. That his family owned half the skyline she could see from her window. All she knew was the way he watched her move through her small kitchen. The weight of his attention, not invasive, just present, like he was memorizing something. "You're not Korean," he said. Not a question. "Ghanaian. By way of London. By way of running away." She surprised herself with the honesty. "You. Korean. By way of duty. By way of." He paused. "Also running away." Their eyes met. And Madison felt it. That sudden elevator drop in her chest, that sense of standing at the edge of something vast. She'd felt it once before, the night before her wedding that never happened. The universe asking, "Are you sure? Because after this, everything changes." She handed him the second cup. His fingers brushed hers as he took it, and she noticed, really noticed, how beautiful his hands were despite their trembling. Long fingers. Careful. The hands of someone who'd been taught to hold precious things. "This won't cure you," she said softly. "You know that, right? Just tea. Just comfort." He took a sip. closed his eyes again. When he opened them, they were steady on hers. "Then why," he whispered, "do I feel like I've been looking for you my entire life?" Madison's phone buzzed. Her roommate asking where she was. The real world insistent. But Jun-seo was still looking at her like that. Like she was the answer to a question he'd forgotten he'd asked. And her grandmother's voice was in her head, the real one this time, not her mother's borrowed worry. Some people come into your life like medicine, child. And some come like a fever. The trick is knowing which one before you let them in. She opened her mouth to ask him to leave. To tell him this was crazy, that she didn't even know what was in the tea that made it work, that her grandmother had died before teaching her the last ingredient, the secret one she'd promised to share, when you're ready to understand what healing really costs. But before she could speak, Jun-seo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and every soft thing in his face went hard. Back went the mask. The billionaire, the dying prince, the man who'd learned to cry silently because breaking down loudly wasn't allowed. "I have to go," he said, standing. "But I'll come back. Tomorrow. Please." His voice cracked. "Please be here tomorrow." He left 300,000 won on the table. And his scarf on the back of the chair. Madison picked it up after he'd gone. Cashmere midnight blue, still warm from his neck, and brought it to her face without thinking. It smelled like expensive cologne and hospital antiseptic and something underneath that made her heart hurt. "Who are you?" she thought. And louder, more dangerous. "Why does it already feel like losing you would break something I didn't know I had?" He didn't come back the next day. Madison told herself it didn't matter. Wrapped his scarf in tissue paper, set it on the shelf behind the counter, tried not to look at it every 5 minutes like some kind of fool. She had customers. 3 whole customers. A Nigerian grad student buying black soap, an old Korean woman who came in weekly for her arthritis blend, and a lost tourist who thought this was a cafe. She wasn't waiting for him. Except she made the tea anyway. Double batch. Just in case. By closing time, she'd almost convinced herself he'd been a fever dream. Rich dying man stumbles into herb shop, cries over ginger root, leaves fortune on table, classic Tuesday, when the black Mercedes pulled up outside. Not him. A woman stepped out instead. 50s maybe, with the kind of posture that made Madison instinctively stand straighter. Tailored cream coat, hair in a perfect chignon, and eyes that cut through the window glass like a scalpel. She walked in without knocking. "You're the African girl," she said in English. Not a question. An assessment. Madison's spine stiffened. "I'm Madison. And you are?" Jun-seo's mother. She said it the way queens announce kingdoms. "He told me about your tea." The way she said tea made it sound like witchcraft. Maybe it was. Mrs. Min walked slowly around the small shop, taking in the dried herbs, the mismatched pottery. The photo of Madison's grandmother Madison had thumbtacked to the wall. Her expression gave away nothing, but her fingers, Madison noticed, were gripping her purse strap too tight. "My son is dying," she said finally, still not looking at Madison. 4 types of cancer. Liver, pancreatic, lymph nodes, bones. Started 2 years ago. We've tried everything. Seoul National University Hospital. MD Anderson in Houston. A clinic in Switzerland that charged us $500,000 to tell us there's nothing they can do. She turned then and Madison saw it. The same desperation that had been in Junna's eyes, just better hidden. "He came home yesterday and slept through the night. First time in 8 months. Her voice cracked just slightly. "What did you give him?" Madison's mouth went dry. "I don't. It's just my grandmother's recipe. Ginger, turmeric, some other roots. I'm not a doctor. I can't." "I'm not asking you to be a doctor." Mrs. Min stepped closer. "I'm asking you to save my son's life. Name your price. Whatever you want. Money, a shop in Gangnam, a visa, citizenship." "I already have a visa." "Then what do you want?" The question hung there, enormous. What did she want? Madison had been asking herself that since she'd fled London, since she'd stood in her wedding dress in an empty church and realized she'd rather disappoint everyone who loved her than spend one more day pretending to be the girl they needed her to be. What she wanted was impossible. Her grandmother back, teaching her the recipes properly instead of in fragments. The courage to call her mother. To know if coming to Seoul had been bravery or cowardice. To understand why a stranger's tears had felt like coming home. "I want to see him again," Madison heard herself say. "Your son. If I'm going to help, if I can help, I need to see him again." Mrs. Min's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because my grandmother always said healing starts with listening. And he didn't tell me everything yesterday." For a long moment they stared at each other. Two women from different worlds, both trying to save someone, both terrified they were already too late. Finally Mrs. Min nodded. "Tomorrow. 2 p.m. I'll send a car." She walked to the door then paused. "Madison. That is your name?" "Yes. He said you smelled like sunshine." Min Jun-seo did. "When I asked him where he'd gone." Something almost soft crossed her face. "He hasn't mentioned how anything smelled in over a year. The treatments. They took that from him. Taste, smell, all of it." She left before Madison could respond. The car that picked her up the next day wasn't a Mercedes. It was a Genesis G90 with a driver in white gloves who opened her door like she was royalty and didn't speak the entire 40-minute drive to Songbukdong, where the houses hid behind walls and the air itself seemed expensive. The Min estate wasn't a house. It was a compound. Traditional Hanok architecture mixed with modern glass, gardens that looked like paintings, and a silence so complete Madison could hear her own heartbeat. Min Jun-seo was in the garden. She saw him before he saw her, sitting on a stone bench under a cherry tree that had already lost its blossoms, staring at something in his hands. He looked smaller here, swallowed by the beauty around him. A prince in a tower. "You came," he said without turning around. "Your mother's very persuasive. She's terrified." He turned then and Madison's breath caught. He looked worse. Grayer, thinner, like the 2 days since she'd seen him had cost him something vital. "I told her not to bother you. That you'd probably think we were crazy." "Are you crazy?" Smiled. "It was devastating. Probably. I'm putting my life in the hands of a woman I met 48 hours ago because her tea made me feel human again. That's either crazy or..." He stopped. "Or what? Or the sanest thing I've done in years." Madison sat down beside him, maintaining careful distance. "Your mother said the tea helped you sleep. It did more than that." He opened his hand and she saw what he'd been holding. A small stone worn smooth. "I had a dream. First one I can remember since the diagnosis. I was a kid again, collecting stones by the Han River with my grandfather. He died when I was 8. But in the dream I could smell the river, the earth, his cigarettes." Min Jun-seo's voice broke. "I woke up and for 10 seconds I forgot I was dying. Forgot. Do you know what a gift that is?" Madison's eyes burned. "I can't cure you," she whispered. "You know that, right? I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a girl who makes tea. Maybe that's all I need. A girl who makes tea." He looked at her then, really looked, and Madison felt that elevator drop again. Falling, flying, she couldn't tell which. "Why did you come to Korea, Madison?" The question should have felt intrusive. Instead it felt like relief. "I was supposed to get married. Big wedding. Ghanaian-British merger, our mothers called it. Good man, decent man, just... wrong man." She picked at a thread on her jeans. "I realized I'd been living my grandmother's life, my mother's life, everyone's life but mine. So I ran. Found the farthest place I could think of where nobody knew who I was supposed to be. And did it work? I don't know yet. Ask me when I figure out who I actually am." Jun-seo laughed, real, surprised laughter that turned into coughing. Madison moved instinctively, hand on his back, and felt how fragile he was under the expensive sweater. How much of him was already gone? When the coughing stopped, he didn't pull away. Neither did she. "My grandmother," Madison said quietly, "had this thing she'd say. That every remedy has 2 ingredients. The thing you can grow and the thing you have to become." "What does that mean?" I never understood. She promised to tell me when I was ready, but then she died and... Madison stopped, pieces clicking together in her mind like a lock opening. Oh, what? She stood abruptly, heart racing. The last ingredient. The one she never wrote down. I think I know what it was. Oh stood too, swaying slightly. Tell me. Not tell. But I need. She turned to face him. This beautiful dying stranger who'd stumbled into her life like a question she didn't know she needed to answer. I need you to trust me. Really trust me. Can you do that? I'm literally dying, Madison. What do I have to lose? Everything, she said softly. That's the point. The remedy only works if you're willing to lose everything to keep living. If you're willing to. The garden door opened. Mrs. Min stood there, and behind her, a man in a white coat. Doctor, obviously. And from the expensive medical bag. The house call kind that cost more than Madison's entire inventory. Jun-seo, Mrs. Min said. Dr. Park is here for your afternoon treatment. I don't want. It's not a discussion. The softness from yesterday was gone. This was the woman who'd built an empire, who'd fought death for 2 years with money and willpower, who wasn't about to let her only son put his hope in herbs and a foreign girl with kind eyes. Issa looked at Madison. Madison looked back. And in that moment, that suspended, fragile moment, she saw him make a choice. Mother, he said quietly, I'm not taking the treatment today. Don't be ridiculous. I'm going with Madison. To her shop. We're going to try something different. This is insane. You're listening to what? His voice was still soft, but there was steel underneath. Some African girl who doesn't know her place. Say it, mother. Say what you really think. The silence was crushing. Madison should have left. Should have walked away from this family drama. This impossible situation. This dying man who looked at her like she was hope incarnate. Instead, she held out her hand. Come with me, she said to Jun-seo. If you really want to try. Come now. He took her hand. His palm was warm, trembling, alive. Mrs. Min made a sound like breaking. But she didn't stop them as they walked out of the garden, through the house, past the driver and the gates, and into the Seoul afternoon where the air smelled like exhaust and street food and possibility. Are you sure about this? Is asked as they reached the main road. Madison flagged down a taxi, her hand still in his. No, she admitted. But my grandmother also used to say that the things worth doing are the ones that scare us into becoming who we're meant to be. And who are you meant to be? She looked at him. This stranger, this patient, this man who'd walked into her shop crying and walked out of his family's compound holding her hand. I don't know yet, Madison said. But I think maybe I'm about to find out. They got in the taxi. And neither of them looked back at the woman standing in the gate, watching her son choose a different kind of dying, or maybe, impossibly, a different kind of living. The shop felt different with him in it. Maybe it was the way the late afternoon light cut through the window, turning dust motes into gold. Maybe it was the silence between them, not awkward but full like the moment before lightning strikes. Or maybe it was just that Madison had never brought anyone here who mattered this much, this fast. Sit, she said, gesturing to the small table. Sat, obedient, trusting. His phone kept buzzing, his mother obviously, but he'd turned it face down. A small rebellion that probably cost him more than she understood. Madison moved through her tiny kitchen, pulling down jars, measuring by instinct rather than precision. Ginger root. Turmeric. The bitter bark her grandmother had brought from Accra in a suitcase 20 years ago. Honey from a Korean market in Itaewon where the owner had stopped staring at her skin after the 3rd visit. But she didn't start brewing yet. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Tell me about the first time you knew you were dying, she said. Jun-seo blinked. What? Not when the doctors told you. When you knew. In your body. In your bones. Tell me. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Outside, Seoul hummed. Cars, voices, the eternal rhythm of a city that never stopped wanting. Inside there was just breathing. I was in a board meeting, he said finally. Presenting a merger my father had spent 5 years arranging. I'd been feeling tired for months, but I thought, I'm 32, I work 80-hour weeks, of course I'm tired. He laughed hollow. Then halfway through my presentation, I tasted metal, blood, and I knew, that my body was finished negotiating. What did you do? Finished the presentation. Closed the deal. Went to the hospital. He met her eyes. Didn't tell anyone for 3 weeks. Just kept working. Kept pretending. Like if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real. Madison reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers like a drowning man grabbing rope. My grandmother, she said softly, got sick when I was 19. Breast cancer stage 4. She refused chemotherapy. Said she'd seen what it did, how it killed you slowly to maybe save you, and she wanted to die on her own terms. Madison's voice shook. I was so angry. Screamed at her. Begged her to fight. And you know what she said? What? That fighting and surrendering aren't opposites. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running from death and start running toward life. Whatever time you have left. Jun's eyes were wet. She made her remedies until the very end, Madison continued. Taught me everything she could. But the last recipe, the one for when someone's forgotten how to want to live, she said I wasn't ready for. That I'd understand when I met someone who needed it. She squeezed his hand. I think that's you. What's the ingredient? Not what. Who? Madison stood, pulling him up with her. Take off your shirt. His eyes went wide. Madison. Trust me. Remember. That's what you said. Slowly, Jus unbuttoned his shirt. Slid it off. And Madison had to work not to let her face show what she felt. The shock of how thin he was, ribs too prominent, bruises from needles covering his arms, the port in his chest for chemotherapy like a traitor's mark. But also the beauty. The vulnerable, devastating beauty of a body still fighting even when the mind had given up. Turn around, she said, voice steady. He did. She pressed her palm flat against his back, between his shoulder blades, and felt his heart hammering beneath skin and bone. My grandmother told me, Madison whispered, that the final ingredient in any healing isn't a plant. It's presence. Real presence. Someone willing to witness your dying without trying to fix it. To see you, all of you, and not look away. I don't understand. You've been dying alone, Jun-seo. Surrounded by people but alone. Your mother throwing money at it. Doctors throwing chemicals. Everyone trying to solve you like you're a problem. Her other hand came up to his other shoulder blade. But what if you don't need solving? What if you just need someone to be with you while you figure out if you want to keep living? His shoulders shook. Then he was crying, really crying, not the silent tears from before but great gasping sobs that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep. Madison wrapped her arms around him from behind, holding him together while he fell apart, and she cried too. For her grandmother. For this stranger. For every scared thing they'd both been running from. I don't want to die, Jun-seo choked out. I don't want to die, but I'm so tired. I know. And everyone keeps telling me to fight, be strong, don't give up. But what if I don't have any fight left? What if I'm just human? Madison finished. What if you're just human and that's enough? She felt the moment something shifted. Like a bone setting. Like a fever breaking. Jis turned in her arms, and suddenly they were face to face, too close. His hands coming up to cup her face like she was the precious thing. Why do you care? He whispered. You don't even know me. I don't know. Maybe because you cried in my shop and it felt like coming home. Maybe because my grandmother always said we don't meet people by accident. Madison's thumb traced the tear tracks on his cheek. Or maybe because I've been half dead too, and I recognize it in you. Half dead. Living someone else's life. Going through motions. Existing but not. She stopped, seeing it clearly for the first time. Not present. Not really here. And now. Now I'm here. With you. Probably making a terrible decision. definitely crossing about 17 professional boundaries. They laughed and it sounded like light. I'm not your patient, Madison. You're not a doctor. Then what am I? I don't know yet. His forehead touched hers. But I'd like to find out. If I have time. That's when she kissed him. Or he kissed her. Later neither could say who moved first. Just that one moment they were breathing the same air. And the next his mouth was on hers and her hands were in his hair and it felt like every cliché and nothing like she'd expected. Desperate and gentle. Ending and beginning. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jun-seo looked stunned. I felt that, he said. Yeah, I noticed. No, I mean I tasted you. Honey. Ginger. I tasted you. His hands were shaking again but different now. Madison, I haven't tasted anything in 8 months. The chemo killed it all. But you. She kissed him again. Softer. Slower. What do I taste like? She murmured against his mouth. Living, he said. You taste like living. They made the tea together. Madison showed him how to slice the ginger thin, how to bruise the roots to release their essence, how to know when the water was the right temperature by sound, not sight. Jun-seo moved slowly, carefully, like he was learning a new language. My grandmother said every remedy is a conversation, Madison explained, watching him work. Between the healer and the sick. You have to listen to what the body's asking for. What's mine asking for? She stepped behind him, hands on his waist, chin on his shoulder. To be touched without fear. To be seen without pity. To remember what it feels like to want something more than you want the pain to stop. I want you, he said simply. I know. Is that the remedy? Wanting. Part of it. She turned him to face her. The rest is showing up. Every day. Brewing the tea. Doing the work. Choosing life even when, especially when, it's hard. What if I can't? What if the cancer? Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But Jun-seo. She held his face in her hands. You don't get to use dying as an excuse not to live. Not anymore. Not with me. His smile was small. Real. Yes, ma'am. They drank the tea sitting on the floor, backs against the counter, shoulders touching. Madison had added one thing her grandmother's recipe didn't call for. A sprinkle of cinnamon. For courage, her grandmother always said. For the strength to become who you're meant to be. What happens now? She asked. Now. You go back to your doctors. Get scanned. Keep doing treatment if that's what you choose. But you also. She laced her fingers through his. You also come here. Every day. We brew tea. Talk. We figure out what living looks like for you. And us. What about us? Is this? He gestured between them. Are we? I don't know, Madison said honestly. I'm not looking for a project to fix. And you're not looking for a savior. So maybe we're just two people learning how to be present. Together. And seeing what happens. I'd like that. Even if I drive you crazy. Especially then. They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded. Outside, Seoul turned on its neon signs, becoming the city Madison had fallen in love with. Electric, alive, full of people trying to find themselves in the spaces between duty and desire. Jun-seo's phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up. Mother, he said quietly. I'm okay. No, I'm not coming home tonight. Because I need time to think. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I'm also. He looked at Madison. I'm also hopeful. For the first time in 2 years. And I need you to let me have that. I will. Promise. Tomorrow. I love you too. He hung up. That must have been hard, Madison said. Terrifying. He pulled her closer. But you said choosing life means doing the scary thing. So, can I stay here tonight? Just to sleep? Nothing, I'm not trying to. I know. Madison stood, pulling him up. Come on. I have a couch that's almost comfortable. And tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. 3 months later. Madison unlocked the shop at dawn like always. But now there were 2 cups on the counter. 2 aprons hanging by the door. And a new sign in the window, painted by Min Jun-seo in his surprisingly delicate handwriting. Roots and remedies. Traditional healing. Modern hope. By appointment only. The chemotherapy had worked. Not miraculously. There was no miracle, just science and luck and Min Jun-seo's body deciding, finally, to fight back. His tumors were shrinking. Slowly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which was medical speak for, "We have no idea why this is working, but we'll take it." Min Jun-seo said it was the tea. His doctors said it was the new treatment protocol. Madison thought it was probably both. And maybe also the way Min Jun-seo had started painting again. Watercolors of the Han River, of her shop, of her hands measuring ginger. The way he'd cut back his work hours. The way he'd told his mother he was moving out of the estate into an apartment in Itaewon, 3 blocks from Madison's shop. The way he'd learned to say, "I'm tired," instead of pushing through. "I'm scared," instead of pretending strength. "I need you," instead of suffering alone. The door opened. Min Jun-seo came in with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of pastries from the French bakery that had opened down the street. He looked better, still thin, still tired, but with color in his cheeks and light in his eyes and that smile he saved just for her. "Morning, boss," he said. "I'm not your boss. You're definitely my boss." He kissed her, soft and familiar. "You literally tell me what to do all day. That's because you don't know the difference between turmeric and ginger. They're both orange." Madison laughed, pulling him close. He still smelled like hospital sometimes, antiseptic and fear, but underneath was coffee and paint thinner and the honey ginger soap she'd made him. The scent of someone learning to live again. "How are you feeling?" she asked. The question they asked each other every morning. The sacred check-in. "Alive," Min Jun-seo said. "Scared. Hopeful. In love." He tucked a curl behind her ear. "All of it. Everything. Good answer. I learned from the best." They brewed the tea together, moving around each other in the small kitchen like dancers who'd learned each other's rhythm. So still trembled sometimes. Madison still woke at 3 a.m. terrified he'd stop breathing. Neither of them knew how much time they had. 6 months, 6 years, 60 if they were blessed. But they'd learned something her grandmother had tried to teach her. That presence is the only remedy that matters. That showing up every day even when, especially when, it's hard is the thing that saves us. Not from death. From dying before we've lived. Min Jun-seo poured the tea into 2 cups. Mismatched pottery Madison had bought at a market in Insadong. She'd been alone then. Running from everything. Half alive in a city that felt like exile. Now it felt like home. "To showing up," Min Jun-seo said, raising his cup. "To being present," Madison replied. They drank together as Seoul woke up around them. Messy, beautiful, impossible Seoul with its neon and noise and the way it held space for people trying to become themselves. The shop phone rang. Their first appointment of the day. Min Jun-seo answered it, and Madison watched him smile, explain, listen with the patience she'd taught him. Watched this man who'd walked into her shop crying 6 months ago because he'd forgotten what hope smelled like. Now he knew. Now they both did. And when he hung up and reached for her hand, she took it. Not because she had all the answers, not because she could promise forever, but because presence was the practice. Showing up was the work. Love was the remedy that asked everything. And for the first time in her life, Madison was ready to give it. "Ready?" she asked. She kissed him once more, tasting ginger and honey and the future neither of them could predict but both were brave enough to want. "Ready," she said. And together they opened the door.